Good afternoon. I'm happy to have you join us here today at the School for Environment and Sustainability's Environmental Justice Lunchtime Lecture Series, Justice Agendas for Environmental Crises. I'm Melissa Bartlett, and I'm so pleased to be facilitating this series and its related seminar this semester. In this format, we've been working in our class to present public lectures with our guest speakers to create a place that is and space that is challenging for us, where we get to have conversations with researchers and practitioners pushing out at the edges of the environmental justice frame as they're exploring theories and advancing new practices. Just a note to students who are in our Zoom room. This course is part of the SEAS curriculum and will be taught next semester by Dr. Rebecca Harden. If you're interested in it, you are welcome to reach out to me or her for more information. And for other students in the room who are not specializing in environmental justice, but who would like to add that perspective to your studies, we invite you to explore the SEAS Environmental Justice Certificate, which this course and lecture series are an integral part. And you can find information about the certificate program, as well as previous EJ Lunchtime Lecture Series on our website. And I believe we can put that link in the chat for you for your purposes. But all that's for next semester. For today's interdisciplinary and intergenerational conversation, we're pleased to have with us SEAS Samuel A. Graham Dean Jonathan Overpeck. Peck is an international leader in interdisciplinary climate science and research, and he'll be joining us to introduce our speaker, Dr. Brandy Brown of Walker Miller Energy Services. She will be talking about the importance of justice and equity as we create innovative energy solutions to address the climate crisis. I'm so pleased to be working today with two students from the course, SEAS Sustainability and Development student, Sydney Cartwright, who's interested in building just and equitable government policies around land and natural resources. And our student facilitator today is Ashley Mackas. Ashley is a second-year master's student at SEAS, specializing in environmental justice and ecosystem science and management. She has extensive experience in environmental education and place-based education, is really passionate about connecting communities and collaborative conservation efforts. And she's joining us here from Montana today, and we look forward to her comments at the end of Dr. Brown's talks. So with that, Dr. Dean Overpeck, we would like to turn it over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Melissa. It's a real honor for me. Over the last couple of years, I've gotten to know Dr. Brandy Brown and very enjoyed working with her at the state level. But let me do an introduction because she's a very impressive individual, and we're lucky to have her here with us today. Dr. Brandy Brown is an experienced energy strategist with deep industry knowledge and demonstrated success in advancing decarbonization solutions from conception to implementation. Currently, she is the Chief Innovation Officer at Walker Miller Energy Services in Detroit, where she blends research and emerging technology to deliver innovative energy solutions to historically marginalized communities. Prior to joining Walker Miller, Dr. Brown served as the Climate and Energy Advisor and led the Office of Climate Energy, which was created by Governor Whitmer. This is how I first ran into Brandy. In 2019, she started that job to coordinate the state's climate action efforts, including coordinating state departments on climate action, providing guidance to local governments, and advancing renewable energy throughout Michigan. So she's a real hero for all of us, getting the job done. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what she has to say today. Thank you.
Dr. Brown, we'll turn it over to you from there.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Dean Overpeck, and hello everyone out there. I'm delighted to be here talking to you about a really important issue to the world, but also really important to me personally. I'll give you a little background for those of you who haven't met me. I am very into my family history and our oral traditions. And as part of that oral traditions, we have memories baked in or interwoven about the land, about living in North Carolina, later Indiana, and now Michigan. And those stories are what drive me. It's my ancestors who have really paved the way for me to be able to work on things that I love. And one of those things is energy. Now, when I began in energy, I did not think or was not aware that I could use some of the nerdy knowledge I had about evaluation and looking at energy programs and weave that into my personal values around caring for the earth and personal values around justice. Now, the values I hold around justice are also deeply woven into my being and into our oral tradition, because as a descendant of free people of color, there's a lot that has happened in this country over the last 100 years, over many generations, that has directly impacted why my folks are here in Michigan, directly impacted how they were able to live their lives, whether or not the environment they lived in was healthy, and whether or not they were either being burdened by or benefiting from what we call progress. So today I'm going to speak to you a bit about that history. It's going to be more like I am telling a story rather than giving you a bunch of facts and figures. I say the facts and figures for my day job, but I really do want to impart upon you the importance of understanding the story of how we got here today and recognizing that we now have a wonderful opportunity to seize before us. And that opportunity lies in understanding where we've misstepped as a society in the past and recognizing what energy choices, what energy transition things are coming up, and how we can be extremely mindful, extremely thoughtful, and build awareness of how we ensure that the choices we make today are not negatively reverberating for anyone in the future generation. So I do have a PowerPoint presentation, but it is not scary. Again, since this is storytelling, I wanted to show you guys just some beautiful pictures. So I'm just going to be talking as the pictures are up. Give me one moment to start it. I do have a couple of slides in here that I will warn you that technology today is not my friend. And therefore the technology, the videos will not play, but Bria is going to put a link in the chat when we get to that section so that you can look at it yourself and see the cool animations that I wanted to show you. So today I really am going to focus on seeing the future, what opportunities there are for just energy solutions, and primarily how we need to position ourselves and approach this transition. So these clouds for me make me think about just all of the movements. When I see these clouds, I think of the wind, I think of change, and that really is the point in time we are at right now. If you look at just the last 5 years and the pace, the quickening of the climate crisis, the quickening of understanding of how systematic harms have been burdening communities, and just that awareness and the feeling that we have to do something now, we must do something now. These clouds represent that change to me. And in those clouds are also my thoughts of what is the energy of the future. Now, there are a lot of thoughts of where we're going. And one of my favorite websites just to check every year when they update it is the McKinsey Futures Global Energy Perspective report. And on this brief, you could slide that into the chat there. If you go to this website, they have a couple of pieces that give you really quick highlights what's going on in our energy landscape. And if you are scrolling there, you can toggle this area here. And you can toggle that area at the bottom and slide that all the way to 2050, and it'll show you change in the mix of energy within the world. And you can look in the report and see how that plays out just in the United States or in North America. So what we're seeing is that low-cost renewables will continue to dominate the markets. They're going to grow and they're going to push back coal. Now, for a time in between around 2025 to 2035, we're going to see larger use and demand of gas as a feeder fuel for us to get to energy transition. And notice that as I'm saying this, I'm not assigning any value or any judgment. Just wanting to recognize this is a transition we're going in and that the fuel mix will change. Another part of the change that we are feeling and seeing is the urgency in responding to the climate crisis. We need to decarbonize rather quickly, and we just had COP happen, and there was some excitement, a lot of frustration from us either not being able to set holistic goals, not have every stakeholder in agreement, and really not have a pathway to make the changes, make these opportunities real and felt at the community level and at the people level. So if you go to the website again, you'll be able to look at what the McKinsey team has done with a really neat graphic of where we need to go and where we're projected to go. So I'm showing that to make sure we all understand that sense of urgency, even though we know what the problem is, even though the energy mix is changing. There's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of fear that is building about how are we going to get there. Those folks that I used to work with at the state and at the U.S. Climate Alliance and all over the place, you know, it really is a stressful thing to figure out and get people to understand how important this is for all of humanity. Now, sometimes when we are chasing any reductions, any goals, we get blinded by just hitting that goal, just by meeting that target. And if we take a moment and reflect on history, if we take a moment and reflect on where exactly we have been in other situations where we wanted to move the country forward or move the world forward, if we think about industrialization, if we thinking out how countries have built out on top of consumerism, if we think about all those things, the concept that society was chasing was progress. And I want to pause for a minute and have us all think about what is progress? Who is it for? What is it for? And I think that there's a chance for us to evaluate in this scenario, in this energy transition, what progress actually means and who we're designing it for. Because if we look back on the past, we can learn from it. And now I am going to give this blast from the past. So this Model T, this bad boy was just, you know, had a tremendous impact. An impact that folks who were building it, who were just trying to make transportation easier, and also have a product that would sell, you know, did they envision that highways would one day reach to the sky? Did they envision the result of a large investment in internal combustion engines, the result and how that changed how we relate to one another as people, as community, how it changed the air that we breathe, how decisions were made to plow through communities, existing thriving communities, to build highways. There are a lot of reverberations in every choice that we make, and not all of them may be just. But it is important for us that just like the impact of this Model T, any energy infrastructure, any energy investments that we do, we need to do as my good friend, Dr. Tony Reams, and then environmental justice public advocate Regina Strong would always remind me at the state of Michigan, is that, you know, ask ourselves, who does this benefit and who does it benefit? So the Model T had a really interesting, excuse me, need some more coffee here. It had an interesting impact, not only from a behavioral standpoint, but it had an impact in how we as people adopt new technology, how excited we can be, and how sometimes the barriers that it creates or the gaps that it widens, we're not too keen on acknowledging upfront, right? We want to celebrate all the good things. We don't want to look at the inequities that may occur from them, but I argue that it is our responsibility to look at what inequities exist, what ones we've caused in the past, and what we now need to consider as we move forward. I will add that I do believe it's our responsibility as we're investing in energy infrastructure to also invest in ensuring that it is just. Now, I know we can't control the ripple generations from now, but if each generation takes it as their responsibility to do their best, then I think we may be better than we've been in the past. So the next slide is also a pictorial representation of something else that has tremendously impacted the world: commercial agriculture. And I'm not gonna nerd out on this, but I am reminded every time I am introducing, a couple of years ago, I introduced a brownie troop, and my brownie troop that I led in how things were grown and just the, how to eat from the earth. And that was a new concept for a lot of folks. But if you think about how our society has changed since the introduction of commercial agriculture, there may be some things that we say, that was a good change. There may be some things that we say was a bad change. But in that, we need to acknowledge that there is change and that we have a responsibility to care for that change. So the sunshine. I told you I would show you pictures of beautiful things. And I'm not going to talk all that much longer because I do want to have more of a dialogue and answer questions and hear a little bit of your thoughts. So the sunshine, for me, this triggers, new day and new beginning. And I do believe that that's what we have. If we are considering building out of solar infrastructure, if we're considering what infrastructure we need to keep going today and what that energy mix looks like, we need to understand what the people cost is. And I found in many of my past work that unlike measuring, kWh or in emissions, measuring metric tons of something, we do a really bad job of measuring the impacts of our energy use on people. Really poor job, especially people who are overly burdened by this. And when I mean measure, I don't mean, just research. I don't mean undertake another study. What I mean is identifying, valuing that in our everyday transactions and our everyday choices. What does it mean to delay a transition to renewable energy? What does it mean to make those large-scale investments across the country and not ensure that there's some wealth building going on in disproportionately impacted communities? So I do want to say one more thing. If anyone has taken the time to read Capital in the 21st Century, it's by Thomas Piketty, and he does a fantastic job of exploring some of the past wealth transfers through progress, and does a really good job of showing us how recurring investments that benefits those of us who tend to receive all of the benefits, that over time results in a increased concentration of wealth. And so we've had this conversation over the last decade or so about inequities, but I want to tie that to our energy transition and what justice means. All of the plans we are making, all of the considerations of justice with health also need to consider wealth, consider the choices we've made in the past, and consider the ones we may need to make in the future. Those implications are frightening if we do not. So I ask you, what future are we building? What future are we investing in? What is the future we want? What does justice look like? Who does justice include? Who have we left out? So what future do you see? And I know I've left a ton of time. I warned the team that I would be probably concise today, but I really am interested in any questions you have. If there are questions about particular technologies, I ask that you think about them first through a justice lens.
Thank you, Brandy. Ashley and Sydney, would you like to follow up for a minute?
I would. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Brown, for being here with us today. I am Sydney Cartwright, a first-year student here at SEAS, specializing in sustainability and development. Before we begin our conversation, we would like to start with a land acknowledgement, with which we remind ourselves of the work to be done as a result of the hurtful consequences dispossession has had on the Native peoples of this land today. We acknowledge and recognize that the historical origins and present location of the University, Michigan, originally known as Michigami. It is the ancestral land of the Wyandot and the Anishinaabe peoples, who are also known as the peoples of the Three Fires, Otcheway, Awada, and Potawatomi. We acknowledge the sovereignty and the self-determination of Indigenous peoples, and recognize and denounce the societal and state-sanctioned violence, theft, and genocide inflicted and perpetuated against Indigenous peoples to benefit settlers, colonial powers, and all of us at the university today. Given our topic today, we would also like to acknowledge that we are drawing on the gifts of the earth in order to have the energy needed for us to move together. We note that such resources come at a deep cost to communities near and far. These words are not enough, but may they serve as a reminder that we all must take actions to restore right relations and stand in solidarity with the Wyandot and the Anishinaabe and all Indigenous peoples worldwide as they seek visibility and sovereignty of Native geographies. Let us take a moment of reflection. We will now start the student commentary section, and I am passing it off to Ashley.
Thank you, Sydney. My name is Ashley Mackas. I'm a second-year SEAS student specializing in EJ and Ecosystem Science and Management. I'm just going to share a few comments and then I'll facilitate our Q&A today. I just want to start by deeply thanking Dr. Brandy Brown for being present and engaging with us today. Your work on recognizing opportunities for innovation in the energy sector while empowering communities and taking on issues from an interdisciplinary approach is inspiring. I was struck by the parallels between energy injustice and issues in public health, tree equity, systematic racism, the housing crisis, and economic inequality. I also discovered that energy justice put a name to some of my own life experiences. I grew up in a low-income, single-parent household in a very old house that was extremely energy inefficient. Every winter, we would essentially shrink wrap all of our windows, block off rooms to heat only the essential ones, and slippers and sweaters were required all winter long. My mother did all she could to save energy and therefore save money. But when our roof began to fall apart while I was in high school, the loan that cost to fix the roof and the high energy bills to heat our house required her to declare bankruptcy, and we lost our home that winter. The research at the Urban Energy Justice Lab at SEAS highlights how, as state policies have emerged this past decade to provide both economic and environmental benefits, these benefits have not been equally distributed, as high-income consumers on average had more energy savings from these programs than low-income consumers. This injustice compounds with other struggles folks may have, such as my personal story with our family experiencing high energy bills alongside medical bills, being a single parent household, and being low income. For others, having an energy burden compounds with issues around racial injustice, housing insecurity, and health disparities. As we tackle the climate crisis and implement programs and policies around energy efficiency, renewable energy, and decarbonization, there needs to be genuine engagement with who's benefiting from these investments. These programs and policies must take on the root racial, social, and economic causes of inequitable energy benefits and burdens in this country. Further, we must have diversity and leadership around who's creating these programs, policies, and technologies. We have an opportunity to be innovative and invest not just in programs and technologies, but in communities. Dr. Brandy Brown is approaching the energy movement from an interdisciplinary lens that really aims at empowering communities and creating approaches that allow energy to be reliable, equitable, and affordable. Dr. Brown, we're now going to move into Q&A with the audience here today, and I wanted to kick us off with a question of my own. As someone who's beginning the job search here very soon, and on behalf of other students, I wanted to ask about your transition from the public sector with the state of Michigan to now working in the private sector with Walker Miller Energy Services. What inspired you to make that transition, and what are the opportunities and challenges of doing environmental justice work in the private versus the public sector?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ashley. And what inspired me to make the change, I think being at the Office of Climate and Energy and seeing the projections every day and working with stakeholders across the world to try to figure out solutions. There were some solutions that I knew were occurring right now, right here in Michigan, and specifically in Detroit. And I've learned through my graduate studies, I've learned through my work that I prefer to be in the mix of everything and feel like I'm on the ground. And so as I started realizing that, the opportunity for decarbonization is in low and moderate income communities, and that we needed to step up our projects in those communities. I already knew somebody doing that work and speaking that language and really advocating for it, and that was Carla Walker Miller at Walker Miller Energy Services. And she leads this team with the mission of empowering people and enriching communities. And I do believe that that is the backbone of what we need to solve the climate crisis, to take care of energy burden, so that that is not a worry for many of our families. And to the Walker Miller also targets outreach to those communities who are often ignored by other contractors or other companies who do this work. So championing that message and championing when it was not popular and before there was more awareness about the climate crisis, I knew that's where I wanted to go to use what I learned at the state to this Detroit-based Black-owned, woman-owned company to do this work on the ground. So for me, it was critical as a next step in my career. And I will say that in environmental justice, there are so many places that folks who are well-versed in it, who are knowledgeable, who care about it can work. I do say that there is a lot of space in the private sector that does go often unheard of because folks in the private sector may move differently. They may not be as vocal, but there's many people who do believe in equitable worlds and that we have the power to do some good in these boardrooms at energy companies. I know a lot of folks don't believe that, but there's a lot of a passion there to solve these issues and figure it out. So I will say, if anyone is interested in the private sector, take a look around. There are cohorts of people within every company who are just trying to make the world better.
Great, thank you for sharing that. We're getting quite a few comments and questions, so I'll just start off one that was at the top. Someone asked, wonder what the real chance of Line 5 shutting down is and how the state is moving towards dominance in renewable energy. Also, given that DTE controls so much of the energy infrastructure and relies on gas for most of their profits.
Well, there's a lot of thoughts, a lot of kind of disparate concepts there. So one, Line 5, I wasn't personally involved in the Line 5 discussions, but what I can tell you is the nerdy stuff I learned, which is that, I do think, well, I won't get on, to nerdy stuff, but I do think that there is a pathway in a future without that opportunity, without Line 5 there, but we need to have stakeholders all come to the table and move in that direction if that's going to be the case there. Now, we know how harmful pipelines can be. I think we're learning more and more every day. The problems that exist that keep some of these old infrastructure things alive is that we've built an entire society with pipes and different things being fueled by fossil fuels. And so we need to figure out how to shake everything on top to make those changes. And I think it's really, we have a lot of people, I have some dear cousins who are advocates against many pipelines, and they're doing some really great work educating people about the need for that. And there's a lot of people trying to figure out, who are scared and fearful about pulling existing infrastructure down, right? And so I think we are at this weird tension moment where we know which direction we're going and we just have to push there. Now, as far as DTE and infrastructure, I'm not sure if you're, you talk about Line 5 and then DTE is in Southeast Michigan. And I don't know if people know this, but DTE has some of the oldest infrastructure in the country, right? So when electricity was being mainstreamed, it was in Detroit first. And so a lot of our infrastructure problems that we have are because it's old, and we, as a country, invested, just like our highways or different parts of the grid, we made these massive investments to get things online. And then we kind of like turned them over and then did not have any good plans or processes to pay for them. So I can't speak to how much infrastructure DTE owns, but what I can tell you is that that's some of the oldest infrastructure in the country. And so some of the issues we're having right now with higher costs, with the need to figure out balances in different areas of maintenance and rates and all that stuff, we're at the head of the game with that fight, whereas other places in the country will be following us in a few decades if they don't wise up. So I do think that we need to use that opportunity to have that conversation and figure out what our infrastructure should look like at mid-century. Is it the same thing, just with renewable energy in the lines, or is there a different approach that is more just, that works, and we can agree on? And I don't know if there was, I feel like there was a third concept that I missed. There was line 5, DTE, and then something else at the end of that question. I'll pull it up.
I think it might have been along the lines in how the state is moving towards dominance in renewable energy.
How the state is moving towards dominance. Yeah, that is, so there's a lot of different things that have to be juggled in the move towards renewable energy. And some of those very large things are not as sexy as other topics, right? So they're actually, don't tell Commissioner Dan Scripps this, but to me, they're kind of boring. So Dan Scripps is our commissioner of the Michigan Public Service Commission. And the Public Service Commission is undertaking a lot of work to, I think they have My Power Grid that was studying some of these issues and how we move forward to renewable energy dominance. But there's a lot of figuring out the relationship between state regulators, but then the RTO, the regional transmission operators, like a MISO or a PJM, and then MISO and PJM have to figure out, okay, we know we have a lot of wind over here, we have a lot of solar generation down here, and we have to mix and match and manage this whole system. And there's a lot of, again, investments that have to be made that when you articulate them to the public, they're just not attractive. People are like, why do you need 100 million for that? We just want renewables. So I think some of us need to do a better job. I will take that on. I need to do a better job of articulating why some of those projects matter, that there is a push, even if we don't feel it right now, even if we're not completely off coal right now, that all of those things that we need to knock down to be able to get to renewable energy dominance are already occurring. And they're occurring not only because of the demand, and that's what we know works, but they're occurring because it's cheaper, right? So the business case for renewable energy, just blows a lot of fossil fuels out of the water. If the application is right, then it makes complete sense. So we are moving in that direction. I think we're just not at the on the ground development stage for a lot of it. And what we're missing for the states or the country to become dominant, we're really missing making it tangible for people. We have all of these cool things going on, but right now they're living in these behemoth entities, or they're living with really wealthy people who are able to take and I don't know about really wealthy, maybe that just, shows where I'm at, but, people who are able to off-grid their homes or make different investments, those type of solutions are not yet accessible to many of us. And so that's the dance that we have to figure out. And I believe we need to call for just as much investment in accessibility of energy solutions as we do in getting the dominoes to fall on the other end.
Thank you, Dr. Brown, for a very in-depth answer. We have we have a question from Aaron Poses, and that question is, in our energy justice course, we have talked a lot about small scale and community-owned renewable energy projects, as opposed to investor-owned large renewable energy projects. Do you have thoughts on how the former will be better helped with justice and community wealth building, as opposed to the high number of jobs that the latter might theoretically provide to an area?
That's a great question. I do have thoughts on each. I think we need both, and there's reasons. So the investor-owned is definitely going to be able to move the market on solar and just getting these projects off the ground more quickly. So it's kind of like an economic argument. But when it comes to the community solar piece, I think community solar has this fantastic opportunity to not only reduce energy burden, but be a vehicle of wealth creation, or a hub for community and understanding, a way for, I would love to have community solar near me so my children can learn about it. I would love for folks who are unsure of what all this stuff is to know that they can build the skills to maybe run something themselves and one day, be well known for developing the next community solar, I can't even think of the word, but just like be the genius of community solar development or something, and change how we all interact with it. I think that community solar is it is a response, right, to the issues I spoke about earlier, where progress is removed from people oftentimes, right? We're chasing money, we're chasing, some economic reasons for doing things, and then ease of living for some people. But if we match the technology with the people and meet their need there, I think that has the benefit to be super powerful. Currently, in a lot of places, there is a tension there too, where it's like, energy is something that in the past and currently, we need it to be safe. We need it to be reliable. It is almost like we've built this system of control for everyone's safety around energy, because it is something, electricity is powerful, gas is powerful, and it has to be maintained a certain way. So I'm seeing that need for control and safety butting up against the need for innovation at a smaller scale at the community. And I think that there is still a lot of opportunity to think about that in a different way, and be open to something new and different to emerge.
Wonderful. So Dr. Brown, we have a question from your colleague, Kabina Young at Walker Miller, who really enjoyed your discussion. They ask, I know education is not necessarily your lane, but curious to know if you've ever considered any suggestions for how we can start incorporating these kinds of lessons into K-12 curriculum, particularly public school, within communities that are most impacted by burdensome policies. They added such a dire situation that it seems like almost common sense that these lessons should be a top priority for future generations. They would greatly benefit from understanding the path we're on, historical implications, and how to create and sustain change moving forward to now.
Kabina, that was a good question. And I have to tell you guys, Kabina, I've known her for about 2 months, and she is just a master with words. And I told her she needs to remake all of my talking and thinking and everything, because everything she says sounds beautiful. So I love education, and I got into it when I had my own children and had no clue what I was doing and had to figure out how to mother and how to teach them stuff, right? So I actually have been really involved locally in my community, Comstock community there in Kalamazoo, Michigan, with STEM education and energy education. With K through 12. And so I will say, yes, tell the kids everything. There's two things I want to add on to this, is that kids are sponges, and just like you can introduce languages to them, just like you can introduce tons of just wild mathematical concepts, and they can just kind of soak it in and respond. Kids have a lot more ability to learn and develop things than we give them credit for. And especially in our traditional K-12 system, we have a factory model, right, of education. And so, I'm not dissing education, but like, we can definitely give some research. I think all of us who work in energy or environmental justice, reaching back and making sure that we're giving teachers resources, that we're making ourselves available, that if there are children in our lives, that we're talking to them about what we're doing. That's where we can start first, but definitely a curriculum that dives more deeply into some of these things is very necessary. I am seeing curriculum start at maybe the middle school level and the high school level when it comes to developing robots and circuits and all that kind of stuff. But there is a lot more education we can do about, understanding why we built nuclear and gas and coal and why we used it, and then what the evolution has been since. The other thing I said I wanted to throw in there is I had a huge aha moment when my son, who is now 13, was maybe 7, and I was working on some energy modeling. And just sitting at home, and he was watching over my shoulder and just looking at it, and then shouted out, "Oh, well, it looks like solar is the least cost resource. So therefore, yada, yada, yada." And I was just like, what is this kid talking about? So I think opening that exposure, I say that to say that providing that exposure to children is hugely beneficial. One, to make them aware, but 2, to give them confidence that all of these big things that, if I'm using jargon or, sounding like a complete nerd, that it's not something that they can't grasp and that they can't master. So yes, Kavina, all for it.
Thank you for that. I'm going to take the time to ask another question. Does the city of Detroit have a goal or a plan to switch to dominant percentage of renewables for city power?
That is a question I don't know offhand. I know there's been a ton of great work in the city of Detroit, and especially with their Green Task Force, and they're looking at all options and actually are really powerful in their voice and getting other cities and even the state of Michigan to be more aggressive in their goals and targets. So I don't know the answer to that question, but I can follow up with you.
Awesome. So we had another question that asks, does your position deal with the energy water nexus, specifically dealing with the energy cost of water and how that is affecting access?
It doesn't explicitly, but that's definitely one of the areas where there is a need for innovation, and within the last few years, more awareness of how that impacts burden and access to clean water. When I was at the state of Michigan, there were, I want to say 2 or 3 projects that we worked on that were led by Nina Sassy when she was Clean Water Public Advocate, and Regina Strong. And both of those projects worked with Robert Jackson of the State Energy Office and blended some of our energy efficiency dollars to service places where we needed to get some improvements in the water infrastructure. There's also a focus from the DOE at the federal level to bring more attention to reducing energy use for water. And I know there are a few measures in our energy efficiency program that also try to reduce energy use and heating of water. And even those little aerators that some folks don't like to have on their sinks, those do help as well. So although I don't specifically look there, that is definitely one of the areas that Carla has brought up as, you know, here is an issue that people are having. How can we solve it? Ooh, thank you, Peck, for putting that in there in the chat about Detroit's sustainability action agenda.
Okay, great. We have a question that says, what is your opinion on students who are interested in conducting EJ research? Is it worth it to get a PhD when the world needs people who are doing work now, or should that be deferred to working for a think tank or local community organizations?
Ooh, that is a difficult question. I think you're right. There's a lot of need right now for people on the ground, but getting a PhD does not preclude you from doing the work right now on the ground. You may just have a few classes at the same time, or figuring out how to get your dissertation written at the same time. So as a person who, and I kind of am a little back and forth on that, because I can say I had no intention of getting a PhD. I ended up a single mom of 2 kids and no way to feed them. And Western was like, we will pay you for a PhD. So, you know, a PhD for me was a ticket to being able to take care of my family. And so my decision, once I got there, it was the best decision that I could have made for myself, and just helped improve my thinking and analysis of different topics and being able to respond to them. So I say, you know, there's nothing stopping you from doing both, being on the ground, working environmental justice, doing research, supporting someone else's research, and doing a PhD. There are a lot of opportunities, and sometimes you have to figure out what different disparate stakeholders need and create your own value proposition for hey, I'm going to do this research because it fits in this timeline while I do that. So I say do both.
Thank you for that, Dr. Brown, and also for sharing so much personal experience today. We had sort of a comment from Dilip about SEUs and advances in renewable technologies and reducing costs. We were just wondering if maybe you'd want to comment or speak to that at all.
Could you provide a little clarity on that? I'm not sure what the question is.
I think they're talking about sustainable energy utility units, and basically commenting on how it would allow us to immediately get to work on meeting our goal of powering the community with 100% renewable energy in a manner that strongly aligns with the city's adopted energy criteria and principles. And they brought up like Ann Arbor's 820 program.
Okay, yeah, the Ann Arbor pinged it for me. Ann Arbor and Missy Stokes there is doing a bang up job, and I love watching them work, especially watching Missy work. I think that we are all figuring out how to make this work. And so I don't want to commit to one model, but I think that that is a good model. There are going to be some barriers to climb with that still, right? And Ann Arbor is going to figure them out. But I, at this time, I'm not recommending them personally because honestly, Dilip, I need to know a little bit more specifically about Detroit. And I am learning more about Detroit and the community needs here and what would fit. So I will hold and ask me that in 6 months.
Thank you for all of your responses to our questions. They were very in-depth and open. We do have one question about do you have any classes that you may be teaching in the following semester, and what does that look like? What's the subject going to be?
Yeah, I'll be teaching a class starting in the winter semester titled Interdisciplinary Climate Solutions. So the plan for that is to have an interdisciplinary approach. Everyone bring their own knowledge and learn other things. And I'm going to be throwing out climate issues that you have to identify a stakeholder group to figure out how to navigate through to solve your problem. So I think it'll be fun.
Thank you for that. That's it for questions that I can see. I don't know if there are any more questions on the chat before we conclude.
Well, I am grateful to you guys for asking those questions and keeping the discussion going. I'm loving what I see at SEAS, and this focus on environmental justice is hugely important. So I thank you for that, and I cannot wait to see you guys rocking out in the field.
Dr. Brown, we really appreciate your time here today, and Ashley and Sydney, thank you so much for facilitating the Q&A. I think there is a great question about nuclear energy and its role transitioning away from emissions-intensive energy sources. I think we may, just for time, put a hold on that, but maybe whoever asked that could take Brandy's class in the winter.
Yeah, that's the base load everybody's trying to get rid of. And even the nuclear operators themselves have been trying to inch away from it. So that is a problem everyone's trying to solve.
Thank you for your time. For those of you who joined us today, thank you for spending your lunch hour with us. We want to invite you to our next speaker on December 2nd, which will be Rebecca Sinclair of the Indigenous Policy Network. She is a research and policy analyst there, and she's just spent the last 2 weeks in Glasgow at the COP, and we'll be talking about issues around Canadian concerns around climate and energy and the intersection with Indigenous rights. So we very much look forward to having you there. Thank you again to our speakers, and have a good afternoon.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.